Hello, in this series we're going to be talking about ZBrush or Zbrush if you're British. And what I want to do is just cover some of the basics. Now, as you can see, I've got a custom UI here and I'm going to reset that because I've just saved everything. Hopefully I don't break my UI because it's taken a while to develop this. But if I just go through some of the different interfaces here, at the very top right, I can change to different UI, and I'll just go to something that looks similar to a default one. This one's fairly familiar. Okay, I'll go with this one. So as you can see, there is some navigation here and some buttons. And when you start ZBrush or ZBrush, you have a few choices here, and it's kind of normal just to go for a Dynamesh sphere. If you want to practice on a head, there's some basic ones there as well. It's a good idea to look at some of the default files to get you started. So I'll just click on the Dynamesh sphere just to show you a typical thing that happens. So first off, the first problem that happens is people will draw using the mouse, right, and then they'll just start drawing some sort of form of a face, and they won't particularly realize how to draw in the way. So what you saw me do there was press Alt. I pressed the Alt key and I could draw in the way. So what often happens is this sort of face will be made, and that'll be everyone's typically first sculpt, and they'll struggle to navigate using the mouse and make all kinds of mistakes, and yeah, and get frustrated with it and probably just leave it for a few weeks and come back to it. So I'm going to take you through the process. So let's just jump back in history to the first step here. Now this is your history or undo slider. You can see I can go through certain stages. So once I'm here and I change history, it's going to get rid of any future stuff that I had made before. So I've kind of rewritten everything from that point. Right, what you can do is use Alt and you can draw in the way. Right, now we're using the standard brush. You click on this, there's a whole lot of brushes here, and maybe too many to go through, but a typical one that I use is Move. So this Move brush, and I've got it shortcutted to the letter M because yeah, it's handy for me. I don't use M for much else. Okay, so Move will kind of drag this around, but you can't really get anywhere until you move around the mesh. And you can see it's pulling out from the direction that the brush is on. So if it's flat here, you can see it's only able to pull left and right. But if I hold down Alt and drag left and right, it's now going in the direction that it's facing, which is really handy. So as opposed to moving in what we call screen space, because it's relative to the angle of the screen or the viewing point. For example, if I grab the side here and pull it out, that's because this part is more side on. But if I go to the same part and pull to the right, you can see I'm pulling it that way. But if I use Alt, I'm going to pull it out of what they call the normal or the facing direction. Okay, so the normal direction is the facing direction. Right, so I'm just dragging with Alt, left mouse button. Right, and I can do some interesting stuff like this, but I'm not making anything anywhere near like what you see, you know, in the forums and the folio sites, because it takes a long time to get used to the tools and to learn to use reference properly as well. So I'm pressing F to frame the object. I'm using Alt and Control and right mouse button to dolly in and out or zoom in and out. Right mouse button itself or left mouse button, as long as I'm not touching the object, will look around. It's a good idea to get used to that. Alt and left mouse button, well, or right mouse button will pan. So Control and Alt and left, and just left mouse button. Okay, if you want it to snap, hold down Shift whilst you rotate, and it will snap to 90-degree angles. You can also use the face here, and actually if you use the face up here, the little head guy, you can actually get 45 degrees, which is nice. F to frame, and zoom out a bit. So you see what I've got there is not great, right? And what I'm using is something called Dynamesh. So if I do Shift F or click on this, you can actually click on the little line and fill here as well. Fill will give it a solid poly, what we call a poly mesh or a poly group color. And line will show you the geometry. So so that's handy. So Shift F is the shortcut for that. And it's good to see the geometry. So you can see how I've been pulling these around, and I can pull these around all day long until they look terrible. Okay, and what happens is if they get too flat, and I re-Dynamesh, which is what I want to do, there's a good chance there's going to be some little holes appear in these flat areas because it doesn't have enough thickness to make a nice voxel sort of blob is what it's trying to do. Right, so what I'm going to do is re-Dynamesh, and because I started with a Dynamesh ball from here, Dynamesh, it's already activated. To see that, you want to go to Geometry and open up the Dynamesh tab here. You see it's orange, that means it's active. And if I toggle it off and on again, it'll re-Dynamesh, and there's what I'm talking about. This area's got quite thin, it's got a little bit ragged, right? And if I do it again, there you go, there's a little kind of bad triangle in there. If I do that again, turn it off and on again, you can see how these are developing into holes because it's so thin. Now, a way to fix that is to press B for your brushes, I for inflate, and N for the inflate brush. Right, spells out bin, right, that deals with the rubbish. And you're just going to inflate these bits and just turn Dynamesh off and on again, and that's now sort of fixed it. So we're just adding a bit of thickness or puffing up this area. Right, instead of turning Dynamesh off and on again, you can make a little change to the mesh. Usually I just do a little smooth, holding down Shift and tapping somewhere, and then Control and drag a box, right? Just holding down Control and just drag as if you were selecting some icons on your desktop or something, and let go. And that is the same of Dynamesh refreshing itself. So that's what happens when you turn it off and on again. It refreshes itself. Now there is some extra settings here. Resolution, if I bring that down a bit, make a little change and drag, you can see the resolution's gone down. And it's a good idea to work in a low resolution to get the shape right. I'm just going to turn this back off. You see it kind of looks like pixel arty, 3D sculpty yuck, right? It doesn't really work. And it, you know, you don't want it to look like this. A lot of people, they want it to look really smooth so they can add detail to it. But try to think of it in stages of like the shape first. So this guy's just basically, if you zoom right out, he's just a ball, right? There's nothing really interesting about it. Right, now I'm still using the mouse here, which I'm definitely not used to. So I do recommend getting a Wacom tablet, an Intuos, or a Bamboo, or a Huion, or an XP pen. They all work really well, and they're relatively cheap. The smaller the tablet, the cheaper, generally speaking, and it costs anywhere between $50 and $100 for a basic one to get started, right up to, you know, hundreds, depending what you like. Now I do like using the tablet that is separate from the screen, so I don't draw directly on the screen, because I find, one, your hand gets in the way, the screen's at an angle, you lose a little bit more blood from your arm, so it gets a little bit sorer, and there's heat on the screen, so you need one of those gloves to stop your hand sticking, so that your hand slides about nicely. So yeah, so I got used to using the tablet separate. It takes a few months to get used to the hand-eye coordination, but once you've trained yourself to use a tablet, it's so much better. It justifies using ZBrush. Now, another cool brush, so if I press B, then C for clay, and I'm looking for clay buildup, it's B there, right? So BCB is going to give me clay buildup. And if I hold down spacebar, I get some extra options here, like the size, the focus, and the intensity, right? And that just helps me have a bit more control with it. Right, I'm just going to use Control Alt and the mouse button to zoom out. Now I've got something that happens here in ZBrush is this pop-up menu likes to appear when you click. I'm just going to get rid of that. So there is something in is it menu, quick menu or something? Yeah, pop-up. Thought I've seen it there. Quick save, undo miscellaneous. There's a lot of menus here. Tablet, lightbox, startup, interface. Ooh, this looks like a pop-up. Click. Navigation. Here we go. Okay, yeah, there's a lot of menus. There's a lot of menus within menus, and it is a bit of a needle in a haystack and remembering things. So I want to turn off this right-click pop-up, right? Because what I hate is when I'm bringing up my menu or something, or I'm just clicking around the mesh, that'll pop up. I like it with spacebar. That's good enough. Right, so I don't know what I'm making here, right? I have no idea what I'm making. I'm just getting used to the interface and brushing around, and that's very healthy, right? Get used to using the brush menu, you know, press B, try everything out if you want. Not everything will be usable, or they'll be like non-intuitive, so I recommend just brushes like Trim Dynamic is really good for flattening areas. So I'm going to flatten maybe some of the back here. If I bring the intensity right up and the size a bit bigger, I'll make more coverage there. I really like this brush for making some stuff that looks like hard surface or hard flat areas. And you can flatten areas down. Another cool thing with this brush, if you hold down Alt, it tries to fill holes. It kind of pulls the lower areas out, and then you can flatten them without Alt, like that. Okay. So the mesh is looking a little bit blocky, okay, because of the density of Dynamesh. As soon as I re-Dynamesh, it's going to kind of just do it again, right? And if I try to keep re-Dynameshing, it's not going to do anything until I make a change, right? So another good brush, BDS, Damien Standard, is really good for cutting in the way, cutting in some detail, right? But also if you use with Alt, it actually brings out areas. Right, and this mesh isn't looking great, but ideally this should be your first mesh. You're just messing around, getting used to things. So one problem that happens, there is a divide button here, and as you use that, it will subdivide the mesh, and you're probably thinking, aha, that's better, that's what I want, it looks more complete. And you'll do it again, it's looking more smooth now, and you'll do it again, and now it's super smooth. It's really hard to move bits around this way, I find. So if I use the move brush, so B, M, and then V, it's it's just pulling any of my detail around. You know, if I do have detail at this point, it's pulling any detail around. So what you really should do is move down. So there's a subdivision slider here. Move down to subdivision 1 and make your adjustments there. Right, just change what you need to change here, and that will preserve any detail that you've decided to make. Right, I'm going to pull these, God knows what they are, little bat wings out. I'm just organically making some sort of shape, and I have no idea what it is yet. Right, I'm just making some tweaks to the sphere to make it more interesting. As I say, I'm using the Wacom tablet, which is, it's generally nicer. So now I'm going to go up one step just to see what I can find here, to make it more interesting as well. Some different shape changes. I'm not too worried about what I'm creating just yet. These, you know, design is kind of organic to begin with. So now I'm going to use BIN, that inflate brush, the one that I use to fix the wings. I want to use it just to purse the lip area together, because I'm inflating both sides so much that they just start to come together like that, which is quite handy. And if I use Alt with inflate, I can actually make these eyeball holes kind of bigger. Right, and you're probably thinking, why wouldn't I make the eyeballs here? Because, well, I want to have control of them if I decide to change the position of the eyes. I'm going to have to resculpt a lot of things, so what I would do is go to Subtool just above the little geometry tab there, and just go to Append and find the sphere. And then we need to click on the sphere because we're still on this mesh. You see how it's lighter? We're still on this subtool. You click on that, or you can use Alt and click, Alt and tap. Sometimes you have to be only in that area. It's a little bit finicky. Doesn't want to do it. There we go. So Alt and tap. Easier just to do it from there, right? So I want to scale this down, so I'm just going to use W first to move it across. Now, if you've got the issue of it doing this little line there, it's because you pressed X, or you want to make sure that's off, right? Because you might end up stretching the mesh or something. So I'm just going to scale it down and bring it across. I'm just going to press X to turn that off. All right, and then I will bring it forward. And something you can do is click on this little transparent button here. I mean, now we can kind of see through the other meshes. Right, and I wouldn't worry about the resolution of this ball or anything. It's just giving us an idea what the eyeball is and the general size of it. Okay, once you've done that, you can actually go to, I think it's under geometry, modify, topology, and mirror and weld, and that is going to send the mesh to the other side. If you've got the issue of it not able to do that, you might want to switch the the side, but I think that might be fixed now. Anyway, so now we've got the perfect spheres, and now I can see issues with this mesh is that it needs to wrap round. So I'll go back to the move brush, so BMV, and I'll just start to shape round the eyes, so we get a nice rounded area and a bit, you know, for the nose. And I'm making an interesting looking Pokemon or something. So I'll use BIN again for inflate, bring this draw size down and the focus down a bit, and I'll just use it with Alt. So the Alt key whilst you paint will push these areas up, and if I hold down Shift I get a blue circle, which means smooth. I'm just going to tap a little bit. Right, I've got some little nostrils there. Right, and so I'll use BCB for clay build-up. It's a really good brush, this. I recommend using clay build-up 90% of the time, because you can use it with Alt. You can use it to sculpt in where you think bones might be, you know, pushing the skin out, where little fatty bits might be, you know, you can build areas up like that. One thing you do have to watch with some of these brushes, again, is to do with things being thin. If I use clay build up here, there's a chance it might pull the other side. Now it's not doing it here because this isn't thin enough, so I will just mask this part, and I'll use the little gizmo here. Let's just unlock it, bring it like that, lock it, and then I'm going to scale and move this just to so it is quite flat, just to show you this issue that happens. So I'm going to sculpt here, and what's happened is the brush has found the verts or the polygons on the other side and applied this repositioning to them through this brush, and it's pulled those in. We don't really want that, right? So to avoid that, you have to go up to brush, auto masking, scroll it up, and then click backface mask. It would be nice if this was on by default, because 99% of the time on certain brushes this is kind of needed, right? Especially in thin parts. It should be by default. So now when I use that, I don't get any backface areas being affected. Okay, so that's why you end up building up your customized interface, because a lot of these things, they're kind of hidden. They're hidden in certain areas and you don't want to have to go and find them again. So what you do is you go up to preferences and up to config and do enable customize. Right, enable customize is going to allow you to customize the interface. If you hold down Control and Alt and drag a button out into some place and let go, that button now lives here in the original place and a copy of it here. They both do the same thing. If I want to get rid of it, Control Alt and drag and drop it into the scene, and it's gone again. And I can just bring it back up. Right, it won't save the interface until I go up to preferences, or turn off enable customize and do store config. Right, and you end up building up a whole user interface. So I am gonna load my one, and I'm going to load my hotkeys just in case it's forgot any. So preferences, hotkeys, load. Now to define a hotkey, so here's my pinch there, and it's the hotkeys K. If I'm not in the customize mode, you can see I've actually brought the enable customize button out because I often do a lot of customization. So I've actually did enable customize inside here, and with that active, I've Control Alt and dragged that out and plopped it there. Right, so now I don't have to get into the menu, and I've got store config right under it. So I switch it off, I do store config. Right, but the only thing is the shortcut keys. So as I was saying, my pinch brush is there. To set that, I do Control Alt and tap. Okay, and we got a crash there. That is interesting. Let's go back. So here's another thing. It will know that there's been an abnormal termination, and we can often get our work back. So you want this recovered Z tool or Z project, whatever suits you. So I'll just go for Z project. No, I won't save changes, and I've got that back. Right, all good. Got my interface, and I'm pretty sure hotkeys, if I load those, yeah, we should be good. So yeah, so Control Alt and tap, and now it's asking for a key combination, so I'll do Shift and G. Oh, it says it's already assigned, and if I want to, yeah, I'll just say OK. So now you can see Shift and G, and I'll do Control Alt and tap. So it's different from when you've got enable customize on. You do Control Alt and drag to move things around or to pull them out of the menus. You have to have this off, ideally, and then you're gonna press Control Alt and tap, and press your key that you want to assign it to. So now K is my pinch brush, and I do like pinch. Pinch is good for pulling more geometry into one area, kind of creating something a bit more chiseled looking. Yeah, generally those things, you know, you want to bring more parts together. It's really unusual to hear sirens here this close. We're nowhere near a hospital, so sorry if you can hear that in the background. It's quite unusual. Okay. So inflate is really good for bulking up some of those pinches. And remember, I did that with the move brush, so BMV, make the brush quite small, and then Alt and pull out the way, right? Never settle for the first thing you do. Try a few different things, and don't just leave things there. Don't be afraid to undo. Don't be afraid to try something different to get what you want. Right, I'm going to pull that in the way, then I'm going to pull out the way. I'll make the brush a bit smaller. And now I've got some horns. But you can see I've been pulling this geometry again. Now if I re-Dynamesh at this stage where I've done loads of work, well, one, I do have the subdivisions, so I can actually just go up those, right? So at some point you're going to ditch the whole Dynamesh thing, because if I choose to re-Dynamesh now, it says it was updating the geometry. So if I do Dynamesh now, alright, it's not switched on. Dynamesh, right? So if I switch it on now, it's giving me a warning that there's subdivisions. Do I want to freeze them? I'll say yeah. So I don't know if I can get them back, but I've chose to freeze them, and now I've got this, right? Remapping high res. Okay. Right, I've never actually used that like that before, so I will use Dynamesh again and say no this time. And what it's going to do is just give me a Dynameshed version. And what's happened is all of those areas that are close together have just became one. It's not really respected the detail. So I'll just undo that. Right, so at this stage I want to be careful that I don't re-Dynamesh. So I've got Dynamesh switched off. And if I do the drag thing, nothing's going to happen. Right, so I've got subdivisions. If I do want to make some major shape changes, I'm going to jump to the lower subdivision, right, because I want to keep any detail. And if I want to make a bit more sub-detail, I guess, or secondary shapes. So you've got your main shape, your entire form, the big shape. Then you want to go to your kind of second shapes and make some little changes, a little bit of smooth here and there. You don't want to smooth all the time. There is some nice qualities come out of the clay build-up. Right, and then I'm going to go up and start to think about some detail. The last thing you want to do is start pulling things around on the high res when you've done detail. So that's why you want to leave detail to the very end. I'm going to go on and on about detail because I'm going to show you right now what the real typical starting point is. So let's go back to project, click on the sphere, right, and say no. And most people who have no idea of how to sculpt and they get Zbrush and they think I'm going to be an amazing 3D artist because I've got this tool, there's a sense of naivety to that because they'll go straight into domain standard, so B, D and S, and they'll bring the brush down and they'll just start sculpting a face and that'll be their first 3D model. They'll post it on ArtStation and think, why am I not getting any likes? This is my first ever sculpt. I spent 3 seconds on it. And yeah, and most people will start here and subdivide and be like, okay, now I'm going to add loads of detail. And this only looks cool because I've got a kind of I've got an artistic eye or whatever, but it does look like something I draw when I was 5 years old, to be honest. Please don't praise me on this. I'm just messing around, right? And that's what you should do, is mess around. Please don't post mess around work on your folio, because all it says is that you're just learning and messing around. And folio space should be best kept for stuff that you've spent a long time on and really proud of, and you want people to recognize you for your hard work, and you know, that skill that you've developed, that, you know, something that you feel more solid about, because things can change. And if you're just leaving all this scrap stuff on your folio and you suddenly put good work up there, actually looks quite interesting, and you suddenly put good work up there next to all the unfinished stuff, it confuses people of, you know, your quality, your sense of quality, or your sense of self-critique. So if you do have an excess of stuff on your folio, just get rid of it. Get rid of the old stuff that doesn't matter anymore. It doesn't reflect your current skill set. Right, so I've managed to make an interesting looking ball, right? That's about it, right? So what you should be doing is making, I'll carry on with this. So I'll divide again, right? And I'm just going to do some alpha stuff. So if I change this to, like, I don't know, BDS or whatever, I want the standard brush, BS, standard, where are you? BS, right? Standard brush is good because I use it to do whatever I want. It's kind of my slave brush, right? So I'll choose drag rectangle, I'll choose, and some dots, right? And now I can drag out all these little pimples. I'm going to make it interesting looking pumpkin-ish thing here, right? This actually does look pretty cool now that I look at it, but yeah, it's not my intention to make a weird looking ball. I'm just going to turn the floor off. It kind of annoys me a bit, right? And I'm just dragging out these dots, these little pimples, right? And if I hold down Alt, I can drag them in the way to make pores, right? Lots of those, right? So the problem now with this kind of detail, I'm suddenly choosing to move things around, right? I'm getting all this stretching, right? You can kind of get around it if you go to the lower subdiv and pull around, go back up to the higher one. It kind of keeps them a wee bit better, but look, it gets all blurry and soft because it's averaging a lot of things out. So that is why it's a good idea to do all your detail at the very end, right? So I'm just going to delete the higher subdivs, smooth things out a bit, you know, and think about the main shape of this first, especially if I didn't want a ball to begin with. I wanted something more human-like. So I'm just going to really go through this now and make it more like a human shape. So to begin with, I've got too much geometry. I'm in Dynamesh mode, so I'm just going to go to the Dynamesh and bring the resolution down and re-Dynamesh. Let's go even lower, re-Dynamesh. Let's just tap on it at first. Right, that's about right. I've got the move brush, and I want to use the move brush for as long as possible because I want to get a general feel for this shape, and I don't want to just look front on because it will end up really flat. I want to pull some of the middle area out, the chin area out, the jaw. Think about where everything's going to sit. Right, that's a good shape. I'm not going to worry too much about the neck at this point. I'll imagine it's just, yeah, just nothing for the neck right now. And make an interesting skull shape. skull and some skin, right? Now I've done a little bit of anatomy study here and there, so I recommend you check out some anatomy stuff like skulls and heads, male heads, female heads and stuff like that to get used to that sort of thing. But spend a good bit of time in it, don't just jump to the next stage. There's no rush here. The only rush is when you're finished and you get good feelings about it. A different kind of rush. Okay, so now you would divide, I guess, or you can, what I like to do is divide, then go for slightly more Dynamesh resolution, turn it off and on again, and just say no. So now I've got something that got smoothed automatically by the subdivide and then re-Dynamesh. That way it doesn't keep the hard edges. Now if you're smoothing, there's two smooth algorithms. If you hold down Shift and you smooth, it will smooth in one kind of form, but if you're doing the same thing but you let go of Shift whilst you're drawing, it tries to average out the spacing a little bit better. It's kind of handy for some things, pimples and whatnot. Right, so you can see I've got more geometry, and now I've got the opportunity to work on secondary form. Right, think about where the eyebrows are. Now the eyebrows aren't away up here, right? The eyes don't live away up here in your head. It doesn't leave much room for hair, right? You'd have to build all that up with hair, but then suddenly your nose, and you've got like different proportions. So your eyes are actually further down your head there. If you look at a skull, there's a kind of cranial part there, right? And you got your eye sockets there. So you can literally draw the skull to begin with. You've got a bridge for the nose there, and then obviously it builds up the rest of the nose with tissue, cartilage and stuff like that. And you've got some teeth area there, teeth there, the chin and the jaw like that. And there's actually a gap in here, right? Your teeth go round so far, but then there's a bit of a gap, and that all makes sense to this head shape, right? And then your ear lives somewhere back here like that, because there's a little hole in the skull for the ear canal, right? And then suddenly you find you've got a base shape. So if you think of it more like a skull to begin with, now I can fill out the rest of the nose, right? It doesn't matter if it looks like pixel art or something with 3D. It's all about getting those shapes right. Now I use the move brush again and just make adjustments. Just pull stuff around. I'm just using space bar to select the draw size, right? But that is all you need to get started. If I zoom out, it should read pretty nicely. I can just tap it with the smooth brush here and there to give it a bit more roundedness. Now I can divide, and again just rinse and repeat. Get as much detail as you can at that level. Don't rush to the detail. There's no rush there, apart from the rush at the end when the job is good, and spend a good bit of time on it. So I'm going to make some lip area. Now lips are difficult. What I like to do is use the D-main standard brush and just cut in the way like that, right? And then just Alt key and pull the top part out, just the top, right? And then cut the bottom one like that, and just go a little bit before the end, and then just smooth near the bottom area. Cut a little bit there for the chin, and it's already a bit better, right? This bit's too much, so I'll just smooth it out. No point me rushing into detail. This is not the final shape yet, right? I'm not ready for detail. There's a lot needing fixed at this point, so I'll just build this area out, smooth it a bit. Just get rid of a big chunk there. Again, I'm not doing the neck at this point. Just build the shape of the ear up a bit more. You can even mask it like that, right, and then flip the mask by tapping with the control key. So it's control to mask, control and draw on it, and control and tap. And now I want to press this little location icon. I'm just going to scale this up like that, and like that, and make the ear really big. Right. The reason I'm making the ear really big is just so that I can work on it. Right. Just so that I can work on it. I'm using all sorts of different brushes. You don't have to make the ear big like me. It's just something I like to do. I'm pressing all sorts of shortcut keys, so don't worry. Use whatever brushes that you feel you've got used to it. Right, now just use the move brush to bring it all back in again. Right, and then clay tubes to build up some of that area, or clay build up. Clay tubes or clay build up, whichever one you like. I'm just using the smooth brush to bring all that back down. And then I could introduce the eyeballs. So again, I'll append a sphere, choose the sphere, move it, scale it, choose transparency, move it there, scale it down, and move it in place, and mirror and weld. Okay, let's just move them forward a bit, up a bit, like that. Back to the head, turn off the transparency, and now I build up around the eyes. Right, I'm building up the form that you see in your own face. It's built up around those eyeballs. Right, and don't worry about all this looking terrible at this point. Like, it might be a distraction, but at least you're making some shape progress. I'll use pinch to bring the lips together a bit, and move brush. Again, it's going to help if you've got reference, or you've done some anatomy studies, or drawn some faces. All these things are going to help. Right, and if it doesn't look good, just smooth it out. Have a look at the shape. Think about how, you know, the teeth are pushing this area out. You know, think of the form, the chin also. You know, don't call it final just yet. It's just progress. You're building it up. You're going to make changes. The ear's too big now. You know, things like that. Just smooth it out. There's nothing to stop you changing these things. Think about where the bone meets the skin, and think about where the muscle is. If you don't know these things, you can check any sort of anatomy reference. I use Damien Standard to cut the ear in here, just at the back, smooth it out a bit, and then inflate with Alt to push that apart even more, just to really separate that ear. And I'm just going to smooth this area, this side of the head. Right, and then a little bit more inflate there, and then I could move this part in. Okay, so it's another step in the right direction. Play with the shape of the nose, and so on and so forth. So at some point I'm going to have to use reference to get most of this right, but just getting a nice general workflow for making a head shape like this is a good idea, just so that it feels like you're getting used to the tools, you're getting used to the interface, you're not looking for finished work at this point. Yep, so that's going to wrap up this video. Hope you enjoy using Zbrush. Yeah, it's a mix of the two names, Zbrush or Zbrush, whatever you want to call it. So yeah, hope you enjoy using it. Feel free to ask any questions or recommend another tutorial, and I'll look forward to the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye.